Spoiler alert, Thena's my favorite card of the season. And I have every reason to think that she is going to be an incredibly strong card in Marvel Snap. She is releasing this week in the beginning of the June season, and you need to know why you should most likely be looking at using your spotlight keys on Thena. Now, if you needed to only hear that, I appreciate it, but if you only needed to, know that much, please just like and subscribe first and then go on to another video. But if you could, stick around. Let me tell you a couple of things about Thena that I've come to realize as I was deck building, and I'm going to show you the decks because, y'all, I'm very excited for this card because, in my opinion, it's the best card of the month, and the ceiling on it is incredibly high. So let's dive into what Thena is going to do for Marvel Snap. She's a 2/1 with the static effect of after each turn, plus 3 power if you played exactly 2 cards. Now, while I sat down and I was theory crafting on decks this morning, I'm looking at every possible scenario of how can I play 2 cards and what decks also currently exist within the game that organically want to do that, that on turns 3, 4, 5, 6 want to play 2 cards regularly. And I was shocked with how many decks I felt comfortable saying that Thena's going to be a natural fit. Because one of the conversations that comes up most likely about Thena is bounce, right? Oh, you're playing multiple cards, so Thena's going to be great in a bounce deck. Not always. Because remember, a lot of bounce decks want to play 3, 4, 5, 6 cards at once. Mysterio decks, forget about it. This is not your style of card necessarily. But very specific decks want a 1 plus another big card, or a 2 plus maybe a wave plus Ravonna. Like there's always these weird equation decks where it's giving a little bit of bonus on top of it. And the decks that I've come to realize are going to capitalize on this the most are a lot of the decks that you do already know and love. But I wanted to take them onto a different twist. So my closest comparison to Thena, after looking at it all, is probably going to be US Agent. It's going to be a solid 2-drop, but the difference is US Agent you want to play later. This one, for the same potential ceiling, you want to play earlier. You look at Angela, right? Angela is a very comparable card. If you skip on Thena, don't worry. Most of these decks, if Thena's in it and you don't have Thena and you want to play Angela, go for it. If Angela's also in it, I don't know why you're watching this video, but I appreciate you hitting that like and subscribe as we take a look at why Thena is going to be good in current archetypes in particular. Like, for example, Loki, okay? Loki organically is playing 2 cards per turn minus the final turn of the game. You're putting down 1-on-1, putting down Thena on 2. If you don't have Cable and you don't have Jeff, you're putting down Thena on 2. But then from there on out, there's at least 2 turns that will allow that Thena to go to a 2/7, which is better than, obviously, Maximus's 2/6. And this permits that to happen. Cannonball plus Kitty Pryde as a turn 6. That's a 2. So I like the idea of taking the Professor X Cannonball Loki deck that currently exists, modifying it just barely to fit the curve of what Thena wants to do because of 2 cards per turn. And the curve on this feels pretty natural to allow Kitty Pryde plus other said card. Whether you have Hope Summers or not, that's irrelevant. So Thena is going to be able to shoot up, in my opinion. If you don't go down the Loki swap line, Thena's going to be a 2/11 more often than not, just from the organic play line of how this deck wants to run. And if you're prioritizing knowing your opponent, if you're in, let's say, Conquest, and you know your Loki deck is not in a good matchup, well, then you know this is a Thena ramping deck as much as possible. But if you know you're in a bad matchup, you can just use it as fodder. I do see some potential here in the Loki deck because it wants specifically that. 2 cards a turn for at least 2 of the turns after turn 2. Throw her into there. I think you're going to feel pretty comfortable using that in that deck. This one's fun. Thena move it, move it. This is taking Silky Smooth and bringing it to another level. This is saying I can ramp better than you can because Thena wants 2 cards in a Jean Grey deck. So yes, this is using Jean Grey, and I love making Jean Grey decks because they're exciting, they're different, and they're great control pieces, especially if you play Jean Grey right now, currently in the right-hand side. The right-hand lane for Jean Grey is probably your primary target because it's the easiest way to help combat against clog decks. It stops them from using Sentry, and that all by itself brings tons of value to the deck. So now if we look at the aspect of, well, how can we take advantage of it with Thena? Putting Thena down on 2 in a separate lane, in my opinion, is stronger than doing the Storm synergy in play, where you would play down Storm on 3 into Jean Grey on 4, and then just let that lane do its own thing and you can move into it and play into it. This is an on-curve way to do that by playing Thena on 2, Jean Grey on 3, and then decide from there where you want your fun stuff to happen. Nebula's going off in its own lane. Ghost Spider is helping you to get those cards out of the Jean Grey lane as you move them on through. Silk moves on out there, and Nightcrawler and Jeff and Vision, they all move out of the Jean Grey lane, but your opponent will end up getting clogged at least by turn 5. Thena's deck organically is going to say, I'm okay with this though, because I can still go down on turn 5 and still be a 2/7 by the end of the game. Put her down, plus a Hope Summers even. You're good to go. Put her down, plus a Jeff. Slide that Jeff back out later on and play 2 more cards on the final turn to ramp and ramp and ramp and ramp. Slide it on over with the Ghost Spider. There's so many cool ways to get her to ramp up in a Jean Grey deck because you're very limited. You're ramping up your Kraven intentionally with the Ghost Spider, organically via the Silk, and it's going to go back and forth. This is a really fun style of, gameplay, the move Jean Grey archetype. So I want to have fun with it by doing this. I want to put it together in a different way. This is Thena Move It, Move It. Let's move on. Let's take a look at Basting Thena Turkey. You're going to see a pattern. If you haven't picked up on it yet, you're going to see a pattern. The number 1 card to play with Thena, hands down, is Kitty Pryde. And I want to address that now because you're going to continue to see it in these decks. Because Kitty Pryde, especially Cannonball plus Kitty Pryde, is just one of the best turn 6 combinations that you can have right now in the game if you get down that Prof X. So I wanted to build a deck that allows us the safety of using that ramped up Kitty Pryde, but then also can revert the power later on. So this is playing US Agent and Luke Cage, and there's a lot of early power here, so I can even play Crossbones with it. And Ravonna versus Bast is normally, for something like Cerebro 3, I'm always in conflict of which one of them should belong in the deck because you want it to help your Iron Man, but then you don't want it to take away the bonus from the Ravonna, decreasing the cost. And in this case, it's actually the conflict that you want to have, because whether you play the Bast early or the Ravonna early decides the entire rest of the deck in a beneficial way rather than a contradictory way. So I like the idea of throwing Bast out there, and kudos to Black Dama in particular for the strength of using Bast plus Luke Cage on some of these larger power cards. This is basically taking that similar idea and bringing it to a different location. We have the Iron Man and the Professor X as easy ramp out power via Ravonna, so you can lock down a location on turn 4. US Agent has tons of value here, 1000%, and Crossbones is the current play option in the deck. And here, even in the live chat, they're talking about, well, maybe you can use Cull Obsidian. Absolutely you could. Absolutely you could. It's a 4/10. You could even make the argument to put Sasquatch in here because you're always playing 2 cards, therefore it's going to be a 4/10. There's lots of flexibility with this deck to have big power card plus the Basting line and allowing Thena to just see 2 cards, 2 cards, 2 cards, 2 cards. I think that there's something to that style of archetype because Professor X Cannonball right now is probably the strongest combination in the game. Let's lean into it with some lockdown power and then going crazy tall via mechanics of US Agent, Crossbones, Iron Man, Luke Cage, and just go way over the top. So I like that for this deck for Basting Thena Turkey. Calling this one the Wrecking Ball because it's now taking that same idea and allowing it to be a 5 energy deck. So kudos here, and this is the shout out to Safety Blade, who's really been making Havoc a strong card recently in Marvel Snap. And this is that ramping out deck. This is using Ravonna specifically to get out the Wolfsbane, the Sage, the Professor X, the Havoc, the Angela late, and Thena now intentionally getting those cards to fly out of the deck on turns 4, 5, and 6 and make up for compensated lost power. Thena then becomes a turn 2 option if you don't have Ravonna, but if you do have Ravonna, Thena can become a turn 6 option and still be absolutely fantastic. So one of the things that these decks really want to thrive on is, well, Havoc is removing energy, right? If anything, that helps Thena because it's restricting the amount of cards that you can play on the final turn. So if you're organically trying to prepare for that, why not play a card that will capitalize on that restriction? So leaning into the Havoc line with the Wrecking Ball, I think is a way to be able to do that. So I wanted to have a little fun with the Wrecking Ball and put that into there. I am going to throw I'm not going to go into too much detail here on this Silver Surfer deck because I love Silver Surfer, but this is the first time I've ever built a Silver Surfer deck without either Serra or Magic. And the reason I didn't is because this deck then asks for 2 cards per turn, typically on turns 4, 5, and 6. It will organically happen. But Brood will help compensate for that because those are added cards. They're not played cards. So Thena would still be getting a bonus if you played America Chavez plus Brood on turn 4, for example. Turn 5, you play Forge plus Negasonic. That's another 2. And then you play on down Cosmo plus Silver Surfer. That's another 2. This is a 2/11. 2/11 is kind of the standard here for this deck. I love Negasonic Teenage Warhead. I think she's one of the most underrated Silver Surfer cards. And of course, Mockingbird is in here for the Brood synergy. So you can still go down the line of Brood, Absorbing Man, Mockingbird, and still have an absolutely fantastic time. Even if you put down Thena plus Silver Surfer on the final turn of the game, she's still a 2/4 if you don't have any other better options. So keep an eye out on that. That's all I'm going to say about Silver Surfer decks. It's just an option. The last one I'm going to bring up is the one I also brought up if you take a look at the Gilgamesh video. It's the Thenamesh deck. It's giving the flexibility of a bounce deck mixed in with the scalability of what Iron Man and counter scaling via Shang-Chi can also do. Gilgamesh is going to see a lot of ramped up power via Kitty Pryde, Nebula, Angela, Thena, and anything that really happens with Elsa Bloodstone. So I do like the notion of using Gilgamesh and Thena together so you can pick and choose your battles of when you're going to play the card. For example, if you have Thena come down on turn 3 on top of Angela plus Kitty Pryde, as long as Thena's revealed first, she should still proc. So I don't see there being any issue necessarily with this deck being able to ramp and ramp and ramp, because Thena is still a card that looks for on the abilities while they are flipped on the battlefield, because Thena does not grow in hand like Rulk. We've had that confirmed via the devs. So you have to get her down on the battlefield, and she is considered a played card. So capitalize on it on turn 3 or even turn 4, because you could do Thena plus Falcon or Thena plus Beast or Jeff, and you still got a great head start on getting Thena to be a tall scaler that you can just pair with simply Iron Man and go way over the top. I like Thenamesh as a fun variation of how to use these 2 cards coming out this week. But if you want to learn more about Gilgamesh, you're going to want to take a look at the video, whichever way I want to point over here, because Gilgamesh is going to be a very interesting season pass card in particular. As for Thena, she is my #1 card of the season at this current point. I see her regularly coming out as a 2/7, if not more. And if you disagree, I'd love to hear why. Take a look in the comments. That's probably where all of the comments are going to happen, including yours, because you're going to say hi, like, and subscribe. I appreciate you all. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.